The Bogosity podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of November 17, 2024. The podcast that Cuddy say can't hang, yo. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's pulverize the news of the bogus. Well, the freak out over Trump's reelection just got cranked up to 11, where some of the top dogs at the FBI say they're shell-shocked because of it. Which, let's face it, that's hilarious. They're afraid of having to actually live up to standards, apparently. One of them said, quote, "You know the fit test? How they let the standards slack on the fit test? Everyone's gonna have a real problem when they're running for the door." The first fear is that director Christopher Wray will get fired, and deservedly so. Quote, "It's a countdown for Wray because people here don't think he will stay to get fired after what Trump did to Comey. Trump will say, yeah, fire his ass. Don't let him take the plane home." Wow, Trump is going to make him fly coach. Deputy Director Paul Abadi will likely be out the door as well. In fact, the thinking is that no one at GS-14 level or higher is safe, and they expect Trump to, quote, "smash the place to pieces when he gets in." They even use the term bloodbath. Whistleblower George Hill, who testified before a congressional committee hearing about weaponization of the FBI against conservatives, said, quote, "I have friends still at the Bureau telling me that no less than 50 senior executives are scrambling to retire ASAP. But come on, people, what did you expect? After Crossfire Hurricane, the incredibly costly years-long investigation into allegations of collusion between Trump and Russia, which ended up with nothing, as well as an off-the-books undercover investigation of Trump in 2015, which had nothing to do with Russia. And then there's the Mar-a-Lago raid, where the FBI violated their own search warrant, leading to a completely political prosecution that had to be dismissed. Seriously, you can only abuse a guy for so long. Oh, by the way, that's one of the things this Washington Times article got wrong when they reported subsequent criminal charges accused him of mishandling classified materials. That prosecution is now in jeopardy because of Mr. Trump's reelection. No, that prosecution was over weeks ago, because if you recall, the prosecution was illegitimate because Jack Smith wasn't properly appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. But more on him later. Another source said, quote, "When he tries to do efficiency at headquarters, the place is going to have 5 people if he's talking about a lot of dead weight. Try to find a person that's actually working. That may be the biggest problem there, that there's no efficiency. So that's actually the bigger threat. If you're going to try to make the government efficient, you would start with the FBI, because if you do politics all the time, you're probably bloated." And then there's all the J6 defendants, but we'll talk more about that in the next story. Really, the best thing would be to end the FBI. There wasn't a point where it became corrupt. That was the deal from the beginning. It's funny how most of the things they fearmonger about are things that would be great if we actually had a president do for once. Once again, here's hoping that Trump lives up to the image of his detractors.
Sometimes you just have to stomp some skulls. From the mind of Mr. Dapperton, a game for the ages. In a world where a race of undead furries tries to take over the world's nuclear arsenal, one man must stop them. But which man? You choose. Dapperton. Elon.
Not my Dogecoins.
Joe.
Build me back.
Shapiro.
My kippa's ruined.
Or Don John.
Ow, my ear.
Forget those losers. You know you want to play as me, Lord Killian. That's right. You can stomp the skulls of those commie furries and save the universe as me.
7 complete different worlds with more coming all the time. full controller support. You can even get eaten by a worm and pooped out into a furry cathedral. You know you want this game. Go to links.bogosity.tv/skullstompers and play Skull Stompers now.
We've been covering J6 since it happened, including all of the horrendous stuff they've been doing to defendants, such as keeping them in pretrial confinement for years, longer than their maximum sentence if they'd been convicted, many of them in solitary confinement, i.e. psychological torture chambers, for much of that time. Most of them were only charged with misdemeanors. A lot of them didn't even go inside the Capitol. Some of them weren't even there! Trump has promised to pardon them, and the courts are taking notice of it. In the case of William Pope, aka Free State Will, Judge Randolph Contreras agreed to continue his case until the new administration, saying it will be a waste of the court's time and taxpayer resources if they go through all of that only for Trump to pardon him. Pope said, quote, "I'm relieved that my 4-year battle with the government is almost over. I'm going to win." Yes, 4 years to go to trial. That's a ridiculously long time. Whereas they tried to rush Trump's through in record time to get them going before the election. See how these people operate? Over this course, he had 3 of his charges dropped, exposed the presence of over 140 FBI agents and informants in the crowd, and revealed misconduct of undercover Metropolitan Police Department officers, including at least one provocateur. He also revealed what the DOJ and the Biden administration explicitly denied and the press called a conspiracy theory: the presence of several self-identified Antifa members, some of whom were carrying weapons, unlike the J6 protesters. One of them was arrested for carrying a pistol without a license and possessing a high-capacity magazine and unregistered ammunition. Her charges were dropped the next day. Pope, acting as his own attorney, argued. In their opposition, the government argued that the unprecedented circumstance cited by Special Counsel Jack Smith should not similarly be considered for January 6 cases. To entertain this argument, one must first be blind to the will of the American people who just elected Trump to carry out his mandate to end the January 6 prosecutions. However, these facts cannot be ignored. The circumstances in my case are inseparable from the election of President Trump. The government's continued prosecution of me is also a continued prosecution of President Trump's elected mandate, which is a prosecution of the will of the people. The government should cease their attack on democracy immediately. As this court knows, and as the government has conceded, I was entirely peaceful on January 6, and I continue to advocate for peace and unity in America. However, the government's foolish continued prosecution of these cases has become malicious and not in the interests of peace or unity. It would be far wiser to pause all January 6 cases to allow for a 2-month cooling-off period before the transfer of power takes place. I would also point out that to proceed with a trial that the government knows will result in my exoneration is unbelievably frivolous. A trial would waste judicial time and resources and be extremely disrespectful to every witness who will be required to be in court. Unfortunately, the government seems hell-bent on turning this trial into a circus regardless of the cost to others. The judge granted Pope his motion, using largely the language in his filing. We don't have a transcript, but the minute entry reads, "Defendant's motion is granted for reasons stated on the record by the court." Pope said on X, "Unfortunately, the prosecutor's facial expressions won't make it into the court transcript." Hopefully the truth will come out, including, finally, all of the videos, and this ends up not only in pardons, but in public embarrassment for the FBI, Metro Police, and anyone else involved in this charade.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
And the next example of tops being blown is over a couple of appointments, starting with Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. Just to be clear, all nominations have to be confirmed by the Senate before they're final. That'll happen after the next Congress convenes. Way back in Trump's first term, we took issue with how he handled his personnel. Trump is only as good as, and always as bad as, the people who are advising him. That's why we regretted that Trump caved like a little puppy when Michael Flynn, an excellent choice and one that would have had a massively positive effect on foreign policy, was threatened with charges for violating the laughably unconstitutional Logan Act. Many of the ones he subsequently nominated were horrible deep state neocons: Bill Barr, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Mark Meadows, John Kelly, Mark Milley, the list goes on. His next term, at least, is going to be different. Whether that's for better or for worse, time will tell. One of the ones screeching over Gaetz' impending appointment is Senator Chris Murphy, who said it was, quote, "a red alert moment for American democracy. Matt Gaetz is being nominated for one reason and one reason only. He will implement Donald Trump's transition of the Department of Justice from an agency that stands up for all of us to an agency that is simply an arm of the White House designed to persecute and prosecute Trump's political enemies." Everyone who's been following this podcast over the years knows what a laugh that is. Maybe they shouldn't have been prosecuting and persecuting their political enemies, including Trump and several of his advisors, the J6 defendants, and many others. Ya think? Gaetz, if you recall, is a product of that persecution himself. When obviously bogus charges of sex trafficking were levied against him, Congress is still investigating that. Gaetz resigned from Congress following the announcement. Florida has rules regarding the number of absences before a congressman can be replaced, and this allows for that process to happen so his replacement can join the new Congress when it convenes on January 3. By the way, many in the press and social media are saying he did so to avoid the investigation, but resigning from Congress doesn't do that. They can't do any further investigation, but they can release what they have, either publicly or to a prosecutor. Seriously, we're supposed to believe no prosecutor is willing to take that up? Anyway, Murphy said, quote, "You could literally hear the jaws dropping to the floor of Republican senators who are now going to be in a position to stand up to Donald Trump in a way that they have been unwilling to." Wow, you could literally hear jaws dropping? As in the jaws actually dropped, actually hit the floor, and actually made an audible sound, and you could literally hear it? He was also complaining about Gaetz' conspiracy theories about Antifa being at the J6 riots, but, remember last segment? Murphy is also complaining that Trump will abolish the FBI and other law enforcement agencies. Damn it, Murphy, don't make me like him! Quote, "Trump told us during the campaign that he was going to use the White House to go after people who politically opposed him, and it seems this pick for the head of the Department of Justice is very much in line with the promises he made during the campaign." Sounds like he might be afraid of something. Is he one of the ones that needs to be investigated? John Bolton also railed against Gaetz on Meet the Press.
"It must be the worst nomination for a cabinet position in American history. Gaetz is not only totally incompetent for this job, he doesn't have the character."
Well, coming from Bolton, That can only mean Trump's chosen the right guy. Both Bolton and former Speaker Kevin McCarthy said that there's no way the Senate would confirm Gaetz, but consider the sources there. In January, Republicans will have a 53-47 majority in the Senate, so it all depends on how many of them are old guard establishment Republicans who seem to be going over to the Democratic side in droves like Liz Cheney did. By the way, Trump seems to want to put defense attorneys in the DOJ, which makes for a welcome change of pace. Todd Blanche and Emile Beauvais, who have been Trump's attorneys for years on so many cases, were announced for Deputy AG and Principal Associate DAG respectively. As principal officers, they'll need to be confirmed by the Senate as well. Bolton basically threatened a revolt, quote, "I think it may never come to a vote on the House floor if the new leadership in the Senate goes to the president and says, 'You cannot endanger Republican senators by forcing them to vote in favor of this nomination. And if you don't want to have a real internal party battle, this nomination needs to be withdrawn.'" Wow, you gonna take his lunch money too? Bolton also hates his next pick, Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence. Quote, "I don't think either she or Matt Gaetz ought to have a confirmation hearing until they have both had full field FBI investigations. With his announcement of Tulsi Gabbard to be the Director of National Intelligence, he's sending a signal that we have lost our mind when it comes to collecting intelligence." Your reminder that after Trump fired Bolton, we ended up with 3 historic Middle East peace treaties. By the way, he did end up nominating RFK Jr., who is actually terrible, but see last week's podcast for that. A highly decorated Iraq War veteran, Gabbard got national attention when, in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary race, she was basically the only one with a sensible anti-interventionist foreign policy, as well as largely being responsible for taking down Kamala Harris by exposing her horrible track record as a prosecutor. Gee, I wonder why the Democrats don't like her. They did the usual crap of trying to say she was in bed with Russia and Vladimir Putin and wrongly placed her on the terror watch list. Trump said, quote, "I know Tulsi will bring the fearless spirit that has defined her illustrious career to our intelligence community, championing our constitutional rights and securing peace through strength. I'd be happier if he got rid of the intelligence community entirely, but hey." Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger said on X, quote, "As a former CIA case officer," okay, that bit tells us how seriously to take the rest of it, "I saw the men and women of the U.S. intelligence community put their lives on the line every day for this country, and I am appalled at the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard to lead DNI. Not only is she ill-prepared and unqualified, but she traffics in conspiracy theories and cozies up to dictators like Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin. As a member of the House Intelligence Committee, I am deeply concerned about what this nomination portends for our national security. My Republican colleagues with a backbone should speak out." Well, another CIA case officer, Brian Dean Wright, set her straight, quote, "Hi, former CIA case officer here. Donald Trump won last week. The American people have spoken. Loudly. So sit down, shut up, and let Ms. Gabbard take a blowtorch to intel officers like you who have abandoned their oaths and become bootlickers to a treasonous Democrat party." Here's the question for all those screeching. Where were you when the DOJ was running one illegal coup after another against your own government from 2017 to 2021? Where were you when the DOJ illegally seized the phones of Congressman Scott Parody and Andy Ogles? Where were you when the lies about the Hunter Biden laptop being Russian disinformation were disseminated at a time when the IC knew it was no such thing? Where were you when the DOJ illegally spied on Trump, his campaign, and his family? Or when the DOJ formulated and ran the entire fake kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer? Or when there were violent threats against the lives of Supreme Court justices? And what about that insane J6 operation we've spent all this time covering? There's only one reason you people are acting like this. You are afraid. Afraid for your jobs, your reputations, or even exposure of your involvement in all this criminal wrongdoing in which you either willingly participated or looked the other way. Here's hoping Gaetz and Gabbard are even 1% of the problem you say they're going to be.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-age children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now it's time to supersaturate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. We've talked plenty of times about Jack Smith, the illegally appointed prosecutor of the Trump cases in Florida and D.C. The Florida case, the classified documents case that Mar-a-Lago was raided over, is already dismissed as there is no valid prosecutor in the case. We've talked before about how corrupt Judge Tanya Chutkan is, both on her overseeing the J6 cases, where we now know the Capitol police officers lied on the stand, but the defense wasn't allowed to investigate that, or how many CIs were present in the crowd, potentially being instigators themselves. Then she got randomly assigned to the Trump J6 case in D.C., where she denied Trump's basic rights as a defendant to do things like have enough time to go over 14 million pages of discovery. Have to get it done by the election, you know. That was thwarted by Trump's appeal to the Supreme Court over presidential immunity, which delayed the case so much she had to break the rules again to allow Jack Smith to make this big filing that we went over, accusing Trump of lots of things without giving Trump's team the same opportunity. All of that backfired immensely on November 5. So what now? Well, now Jack is like, okay, we're done. Stick a fork in me. Bye-bye. He filed, as a result of the election held on November 5, 2024, the defendant is expected to be certified as president-elect on January 6, 2025, and inaugurated on January 20, 2025. The government respectfully requests that the court vacate the remaining deadlines in the pretrial schedule to afford the government time to assess this unprecedented circumstance and determine the appropriate course going forward consistent with Department of Justice policy. By December 2, 2024, the government will file a status report or otherwise inform the court of the result of its deliberations. The government has consulted with defense counsel, who do not object to this request. Weird. Now it's unprecedented, as opposed to before, where they shattered 247 years of precedent to indict and prosecute a former president for actions taken while in office. Let me correct one huge piece of misinformation in this Law and Crime article. They wrote, as a result of the way the Jan 6 case against Trump was fashioned by the special counsel's office, the U.S. Supreme Court would controversially create the concept of presidential immunity for criminal acts in the case stylized as Trump v. United States. But they didn't create it. The founders did, in the Constitution with the concept of separation of powers. We covered Hamilton making this clear in the Federalist Papers, and the Supreme Court confirming and codifying it in 1803 with Marbury v. Madison. If congressmen have immunity, and prosecutors have immunity, and Supreme Court justices have immunity, why wouldn't the president? None of these people have an answer for that point. Personally, I think none of them should have immunity, but it's fun to watch the hypocrisy as they hem and haw about it. Anyway, this is very neatly and tidily going to put an end to this, so that the incoming DOJ doesn't need to actively put a stop to it. Just as quickly, Chutkan filed a minute order saying, quote, "The government's unopposed motion to vacate briefing schedule is hereby granted. All remaining deadlines in the pretrial schedule are vacated. By December 2, 2024, the government shall file a status report indicating its proposed course for this case going forward." You know Jack is going this route so he can have a month or two before Trump takes over to say, "Ha ha ha, shredders go brrr," and get rid of all the paperwork that's behind this completely bogus prosecution. Fortunately, others have noticed that too and are working to stop him doing that. Jim Jordan, chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and Barry Loudermilk, chair of the Subcommittee on Oversight and House Administration, sent a letter to Smith saying, quote, "According to recent reports, prosecutors in your office have been gaming out legal options in the event that President Donald Trump won the election. With President Trump's decisive victory this week, we are concerned that the Office of Special Counsel may attempt to purge relevant records, communications, and documents responsive to our numerous requests for information. You know, just like the FBI and Secret Service did after important events like J6 and the Trump assassination attempt." Quote, "The Office of Special Counsel is not immune from transparency or above accountability for its actions. We reiterate our requests and ask that you produce the entirety of the requested material as soon as possible, but no later than November 22, 2024. Furthermore, this letter serves as a formal request to preserve all existing and future records and materials related to the Office of Special Counsel's investigations and prosecutions of President Trump. You should construe this preservation notice as an instruction to take all reasonable steps to prevent the destruction or alteration, whether intentionally or negligently, of all documents, communications, and other information, including electronic information and metadata that are or may be responsive to this congressional inquiry. This instruction includes all electronic messages sent using official and personal accounts or devices, including records created using text messages, phone-based messaging applications, or encryption software." Pretty thorough, but as typical for Jordan and Loudermilk, it's just a letter. Letters can also go brrr through the shredder. But Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton went a step further and actually filed a lawsuit. In the District Court for the Northern District of Texas, he filed, "The Department of Justice's history with special counsels is regrettably riddled with attempts to avoid transparency. Special counsel Robert Mueller's team notoriously wiped their phones, and defendant Attorney General Merrick Garland preferred to incur a congressional contempt citation rather than turn over audio recordings from special counsel Robert Hur's investigation." On November 8, they submitted a FOIA request for Smith's records, but Paxton, quote, "fears that many releasable records, including those that he sought, will never see daylight. That is not because DOJ has any legal reason to withhold them. Rather, Attorney General Paxton has a well-founded belief as set forth herein that defendants will simply destroy the records. That is how they and or their predecessors have operated in the recent past. And Jack Smith's team has conducted itself in multiple ways that suggest it cannot be blindly trusted to preserve and eventually produce all of its records." He's seeking an order that Smith preserve all of his records, or at a minimum, all of those covered in the FOIA request. He can run, but can he hide? That's the question. Whether or not the courts will allow it remains to be seen, but it's clear that Jack thinks so little of his chances of prevailing, which he shouldn't if he truly believes everything he's filed, that it's time to cut and run. So all of that makes Jack Smith this week's biggest Bogon emitter. I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear.
To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv.
And now let's hyperbolizationify this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
We covered a lot of the claims that the 2020 election was stolen. Some of them were regarding the Dominion voting machines, which we've talked about for years as being hideously insecure. Some of them were about floofy security procedures around mail-in ballots and signature matches, which were big problems that should have properly been investigated but weren't. And then there were the ones that were completely freaking stupid, like Sharpie Gate. Now, all of them seem to be stupid. After screeching loudly that even thinking that the 2020 election might have been stolen made you an enemy of democracy, these same social media influencers and pundits are now saying it was Trump that stole 2024. And it figures a lot of that centered around Elon Musk. After all, he's rich and money lets you do stuff, so there. Ask them why that isn't the case with George Soros or Michael Bloomberg, and you'll never get an answer. Anyway, now they're claiming that Elon did it through his satellite network, stealing the election with his orbital mind control lasers or something. A 3-minute video with upwards of 1 million views on TikTok and over 100,000 likes claimed that Starlink was used to tally up ballots and that Elon was able to use it to change the results somehow. Other such claims have gone viral all over TikTok and Threads, including the claim that Musk knew who won 4 hours earlier than everyone else. No, he knew that early because he looked at the betting odds. They were pretty decisive for Trump, and those who were keeping an eye on them weren't at all surprised. They went on to claim that Musk blew up the satellites to destroy the evidence. Hashtag Trump cheated, hashtag swing state hand recount, and other such hashtags have gone viral all over social media, including Threads, X, YouTube, and Facebook, with none of the censorship that those questioning the 2020 results faced, including this podcast. At any event, there's no truth to it at all. The missing votes are just what we said they were last week. California and Arizona slow rolling their results for whatever weird reason. Republicans have the House, it's just a matter of how much, and there are still 8 races to be called as of this podcast prep. Alex Stamos, formerly at Facebook and now with Sentinel-1, said, quote, "We warned about this exact potential outcome in 2020, the losing side of every subsequent election rejecting the results." But that's what we should have! We should always have people questioning the results so we can have an adversarial system where they can be verified. In fact, the reason why voting and tabulating went much more smoothly in states like Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania was largely due to increased scrutiny from Republicans and independents. And that's what people like Grace Rahman of Full Fact, a fact-checking partner for Meta, don't realize when she said, quote, "Even without evidence, false claims like these can be corrosive to public trust in the U.S. and beyond." But that's a good thing, because they don't deserve that trust. Because as we've covered, and covered long before the 2020 election, our elections haven't been trustworthy in a long time. They're all rigged, and it's good that people are waking up to it. But nutcases like these just make the problem worse. Whether it's the lefties accusing Musk, or the lefties saying, "How dare you question our wonderful elections," it's all covering up the reasons why our elections can't be trusted. And it's not because of Sharpies or water main breaks or satellites or even mail-in ballots. It's because the system is set up by the people who win. The elections are run by the people who won the last time and want to win again. And like we covered back in March of 2020, before all of this was even a controversy, we know how to do elections independently, fairly, and verifiably. The fact that they refuse to do so should speak far more loudly than any of these social media or legacy media buffoons. It means that the real point of elections is just LARPing, to make believe that these people somehow have power over our lives and are able to do things that would be criminal for anyone else to do. And they all live in fear of the day we all realize it. So that makes all of these in the news and social media this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this Never Ignore Coincidence, unless, of course, you're busy, in which case, always ignore coincidence edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord or at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Clarence Darrow. In many of the nations of the earth, the real governing power has stood behind the throne, has suffered their creatures and their puppets to be the nominal rulers of nations and states. But in every case, the real rulers are the strong, and the state is used by them to perpetuate their power and serve their avarice and greed. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.